Today we're going to use Lightroom to save a bad photo. So at the end of last year, I put together an ebook release of some of my images from my fall 2023 trip to West Virginia. I'll link to that ebook down in the description below. It's a free download, no email address required or anything like that, but it's just a compilation of images from that trip. But in the process of putting that ebook together, I realized I needed an image of Blackwater Falls, the prominent waterfall in that area. And while I did take some pictures of it, I really wasn't super happy with any of the ones I got. I tended to visit at the wrong time of day, so the light wasn't the way it should be, and I was essentially on the wrong side of the waterfall at the wrong time, and both times I photographed that waterfall. However, for the ebook, I felt like that image needed to be in there, so I was a little desperate, and so I actually used one of those images I normally would have thrown away and spend some real time editing that photo in order to turn it into a passable state so I could at least include an image that wasn't terrible of Blackwater Falls. So really, I hesitated in doing this video because ultimately you want to capture the scene as close to what you want in camera as you can. Obviously, landscape photographers edit their images, but you really want to sort of avoid the habit of fixing bad images. You want to practice and refine your technique of capturing the image in camera so that the edits you make are more subtle enhancements just to convey that feeling that you felt when you were there. Doing something like I'm about to do and taking an image, it really wasn't that great, and completely editing it to try to save it is not the best way to go. And if you're trying to grow as a landscape photographer, make sure you put that emphasis on field craft and capturing the image the way you want and not on getting to be an editing wizard to save photos. With that said, I thought this would be a good example to at least showcase some of the Lightroom tools and to show you just how much you can correct in an image if you sort of messed it up in field like I did. Now, hopefully you'll use some of these tips and tricks to correct a small part of the image. Obviously, it's difficult to get everything perfect in an image, so there might be one little small spot you want to make an adjustment on. And I thought this, since the whole photo sort of needed a lot of work, would be a great way to show just how capable Lightroom is with the adjustments it can make. And we're going to take this photo from sort of what I call a bad photo into what's a passable photo and was included in my ebook. So with that, we'll turn to the computer. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think made this image a bad image. Then we're going to get to work in Lightroom and make some tweaks and adjustments so at the end we end up with a result that's not too bad. So let's get to it. Okay, so here we are with this picture of Blackwater Falls, and it was taken from one of the upper observation decks. So let's take a look at some of the things I consider wrong with this photo so you're sure to know where I'm trying to go with this particular image. One, obviously, I probably should have zoomed in a little bit more. All this tree is sort of blocking the view. It's a little heavy on this outer side, and same with this side. So I've sort of got these two heavy prominent things to either side of the image. And I really want to draw the eye into the center of this image because that's where I want the viewer to be. I want him to be looking at this waterfall. But right off the bat, I'm sort of stuck with these trees on either side, which while they do have some fall color, they're not really the emphasis of this particular photo. Beyond that, the light of day, the sun was off to the west, which is off to this side of the photo. And what that means is the waterfall was falling into shade and was in the darker part of the image. And then the trees, especially the ones over here on the right-hand side, are bright. They're what's catching the light, and that's what's there. So not only do I have these large trees being heavy-handed on the edges of my frame, there's also bright. So the eye, again, is having a hard time moving past and down into the falls. And that's where I want the viewer's eye. That's essentially what I'm trying to fix with this image. My goal here is I'm going to fix the crop, which is, you know, semi-common. I mean, it's always nice to get the cropping correct in camera so you don't have to crop later. But that one, pretty forgivable. It's one of the reasons I shoot on a higher megapixel camera like the Z7 II. But the light problem here is more significant because, like I said, even after I crop this, as you'll see, it's still going to be the brighter scenes where my eyes are going to get pulled to. So I'm going to use Lightroom to almost flip this image, so that the waterfall is the brighter side and the trees are the darker side so that I can get the viewer's eye into the image. Let's first fix the crop, and we'll just keep it with a 2:3 ratio to keep it sort of simple. I mean, I want some of this to frame it because those are framing elements. It's just too heavy of a frame. So let's play with this. It's not too bad. It's a little heavy over there. I want a little bit of that color. So what I'm trying to do, I want a little bit of the color because it's the fall colors. And I want some of the colors up here and up behind the falls. And I've sort of minimized this. I'm still not sure I like this crop. Okay, so let's adjust this just a little bit more. I'm just trying to fine tune where I like this crop. So I've got the tree color in here, I've got that pop of color, I've got a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red here, and I've got the rocks down here to sort of bring this V into the image so I don't feel like it's too cut off. This crop did cause me to lose some of the yellows up here, but I'll still have them in here. So I think for the purpose of this demonstration, that's not too bad. Essentially, I'll still have these to sort of play with, these trees up in here. So I feel decent about this crop for the sake of this video, but I'm still left with this light problem of this being bright over here on the edge. Even this foreground is bright, and so it makes it hard for the viewer's eye to go into the image to the waterfall. So let's start with my basic edits. First thing down here in lens corrections, we're going to remove chromatic aberration, profile corrections. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some global adjustments because I've got a high area of contrast. I've got these darks down here at the waterfall, I've got the brights here. So I just want to sort of even the whole frame out globally. So we're going to knock a little bit of the exposure off, bring a little bit of the whites down. I'm trying to take a little bit of the contrast out so the whole picture is a little more even. And I'm doing that with these just subtle adjustments with the highlights and shadows. Just trying to even it out here. We'll bring this over just a little bit. And I'm not going too extreme on any of this. Just trying to, like I said, get it to an even point where I can then do some additional edits. I'm going to use the global contrast just to bring that down a touch. Let's look at the before. So like I said, super subtle. You can just see this is the before. It's just a little bit more contrast, a little bit more crunchy. And this is the after. I've just sort of pulled it out. Obviously, these are global adjustments, and anything I'm changing is changing both the dark area and the bright area. I'm trying to pull some of the contrast out here. Once I get that contrast pulled out, I'm actually going to maybe play with the highlights a little more. I'm going to pull those down just a little bit more. So I've essentially taken this image from a little more contrasty down to a little more subtle. So now I'm going to start these targeted local adjustments. And again, what I'm trying to do is flip this image. I'm trying to take these bright areas and darken them and brighten up this center spot in there. So I'm going to start with a linear gradient over here on the right side. We're just going to drag this across. Everything in red is what's going to be affected. So we're going to just sort of line this up here. I'm going to bring the exposure down just a little bit more. Again, I'm trying to darken it up a little bit. So pull that down a little bit, knock the highlights down just a teeny bit more, not much. And I'm also going to pull the clarity down just a teeny bit just so that they're not quite so crunchy there in the foreground. Before, it's bright, it's distracting. After, I've sort of dimmed it down. Again, we're bringing it closer into matching what's in the center of the image. I have that same problem over here on the left side. So we're just going to do another mask. Go up here, we're going to do a linear gradient. Same thing, we're just going to sort of bring this across here. Feather that just a little bit more. So the red's what's going to change. This area between the lines is what's being feathered, so it makes that a gradual transition. We're going to do very similar. We're going to knock the exposure down just a little bit. About -17, pull those highlights down just a little bit, and let's bring the clarity down just a touch again because I don't want those leaves too crunchy in the foreground right there. And let's take a look at the before and after. So as you can see, I've started to bring this image a little more even. It's a little closer to where I want it to be. Still brighter on the outside, but now I need to work on this center section where the waterfall is to try to bring it out. I'm going to try to bring it up. So to do that, I'm going to use a radial gradient, and I'm going to just sort of slip it right down into there. I'm going to come in here, masks again, do radial gradient, and we're trying to target a rather large area. Like I said, the spot between the lines here is the feather. So I think we're good there. Narrow this up just a teeny bit over here. Probably bring that down, bring this up a touch. Okay, so now everything I'm going to do here is affect this waterfall area in the center and the trees in the back. And I'm trying to give it just that warmer, brighter look. So first thing we'll do is we'll bring the exposure up a little bit. Bring it up. Bring the highlights just up a little bit more. Let the shadows just keep some texture in there. Bring those whites up a little bit more. Let's take a look. So by adding that radial gradient, you can see I've sort of shifted so that that center is looking a little brighter. And I haven't done any huge changes. It's just been subtle shifts of that brightness. But I've taken it from this before image, bright on the side, dark in the center, to my edits. And now suddenly I get a little bit more, the eyes a little more going towards that waterfall. So the other piece I want to do to this, and I'm going to use the same radial gradient, is I'm going to warm that up a little bit because one of the things that happens is the light, the highlights are a little warmer than the shadows. And I'm trying to flip this so that it's a little, the brighter area is a little warmer, the darker area is a little cooler. So to do that, I'm still on this radial gradient, focusing in on this. I'm just going to bring that temperature up a little bit to just make it a little warmer in there. And this does a couple things. Gives that area a little bit more warmth, helps these little yellows of the starting to change leaves pop a little more, and we feel pretty good there. And on that note, we're going to go back to these other gradients. So we're going to, this linear gradient over here in the corner, and we're going to cool it down just a little bit. Just bring it down a little. So we're going to cool it off because in my head, I'm flipping it. So this should be the darker, more shadowy areas. I'm going to use those temperature to sort of help create that illusion. So we're going to cool it down a little bit. Look at before and after. And you can see the subtle shift. I've gone from, this is the before, this is bright, it's warmer on the edges of the frame. And then after my edits, you can see it's almost got a warmish glow in the center and still warm, just, you know, because it is sunlight hitting on there, but it's helped shift this whole image. I've almost flipped it. Now, I've got this little section of rocks down here. I just sort of, it's been falling into this V pattern. So you've got this V, and I just want this to be a little bit more. So I'm actually going to duplicate this radial gradient and duplicate this mask. I'm going to then shrink this mask. So it's keeping my same settings, my same exposure, my same warmth, and I'm really just trying to shrink it way down so I can target these rocks. So I'm just trying to size it, and we're going to drag it down to these rocks right here. And I'm just trying to carry it through this whole scene like that. And let's see what we did with that. So you can see it sort of made that whole V have a similar look and feel. Now, that is a touch overdone. It's a little too bright. I wanted it to sort of fade off. So we're going to come down here. We're going to use the amount, and we're just going to bring the amount down from 100 down to like 85-ish. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so I like that look. So again, let's take another quick look here. Here we are. Before image, things are nice, are very cool in the center because it was in the shade, it was in the dark. The edges are bright, they're a little warmer. I have essentially used a series of linear gradients and radial gradients applied to this image to sort of flip it. I've taken the sides, pulled some exposure off of them, cooled them down a little bit, and then here in the center, I've sort of brought the warmth up and brightened them up a little bit to sort of bring me into a usable state. That doesn't look too bad to me. I sort of want these reds to pop just a little bit more, so we're just going to go down here to the color mixer. We're just going to use the good old-fashioned HSL. I'm going to do a little saturation. We're going to click this little dropper, go find a leaf, and then we're just going to boost that saturation a little bit. What that's doing is taking that color and boosting the saturation. We're going to do the same, this little red piece here. That looks pretty good. Okay, so that gives me just a little bit of pop of color there, a little bit more color. And that's pretty good. So quite a difference. So I'm feeling pretty decent about these targeted adjustments. I think without a whole lot of effort, I've managed to flip the light a little bit on this. So I am going to make a global adjustment. We're going to just use a tone curve. We're just going to put just a teeny bit more contrast into the whole image. Then we're going to use a tone curve, put some dots on there. We're going to pull the darks down just a little bit. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. And we're going to boost the highlights just a touch. Again, this is a global adjustment. I don't have anything selected, so it's applying to the whole photo. But then I'm going to lift the blacks down here. Just grab this. If you go too extreme, it softens it up. But I like those softer blacks, sort of in this particular case, help pull a little more of that contrast out, give it a little softer look, even though my light at the time was photographed was a little too much. So that's not bad. Let's take another look at these masks. I still feel like I'm going to play with this right-hand side, see if there's anything else. I feel like it's still a touch bright. We're going to bring the whites down a little. Probably knock the exposure down just a little bit more. That was a bit much. Touch off the highlights. So yeah, here's the before. And here it is after I've flipped it, just with a series of targeted adjustments, a couple global adjustments. Now, I do tend to use a little bit of vignette on a lot of my photos, but in this particular case, this one just screams for it. So we're going to do another radial gradient. And we're just going to create this giant, we're going to center it up here over the waterfall. Then I am going to invert it. So now it's affecting the corners of the image. And I'm just going to knock the exposure down just a little bit. Pull the highlights off just a little bit. And let's check before and after. Before and after. Great. So, just one more time. This is the before, this is what I started with. My problem areas were, one, the crop was having way too strong on the sides, And then the waterfall in the center was in the dark and it really wasn't getting a lot of the attention. And in the after, here it is. Everything's all evened out and I've sort of flipped the light. I've got it so the eye's a little more towards that waterfall in the center. I think, as I look at this, let's just boost this just a teeny bit more, a little bit brighter. Yeah, made that just a little bit brighter. And that's how I used Lightroom to sort of fix this bad photo that I needed for my ebook into something that was passable and that could be included. Really, the goal as a landscape photographer is to look for those right light conditions and photograph the good light conditions, not photograph poor light conditions like I did in this case, and then trying to fix it in post-processing. You'll find the whole hobby of landscape photography much more enjoyable if you put a lot of time and attention on good compositions, photographing good light, than if you spend all your time behind a computer making edits. But in this particular case, where I needed to sort of save an image so I could have it for the ebook release, I was able to use the tools at hand, Lightroom, to make those changes to bring it into something that was a passable image. And the biggest reason I'm showing you this as to how this worked is just to sort of show you if you end up with a problem spot in one of your photos, hopefully it's not the whole image, but maybe it's just one particular spot, those series of tools, things as simple as radial gradients, linear gradients, and a little bit of exposure tweaks and changes can really help you minimize that problem spot so that people are looking at what you want them to look at. So hopefully you found this video helpful and lets you see sort of what Lightroom is capable of. Like I said, the example image today was from my ebook gallery release of my fall 2023 trip to West Virginia. This image, along with many others, are included in that release. I will link to the download down in the description below. Again, no cost, no email address required, just a collection of my images for you to take a look at, as well as a few essays about the trip and what it's like to put together an ebook release, and I hope you check it out. With that said, if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, behind the scenes, and mini gear reviews, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you for watching.